Welcome to part 2 of the CCP's attempt to take Taiwan without firing a shot. One country, one system right off the bat. We'll be exposing new strategies set by Wang Huning, China's top political mind. And he is behind Xi's new hybrid strategy against Taiwan. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. In our last episode, we outlined who is Wang Huning, China's top political advisor to Xi Jinping and the so-called political makeup artist. And today, we'll be exposing his new hybrid strategy to take Taiwan and discussing the timeline in which the potential invasion could happen. If you haven't watched that first episode explaining who exactly is Wang Huning and why he's so important to the Taiwan invasion, well, check it out here and let's talk about it. The first step is called boiling the frog. The CCP is attempting to do what's essentially the Crimea takeover, but in Taiwan.
Get over here!
Before the 20th Party Congress back in November, there was already rumors circulating in China that the CCP would set out a new policy of so-called peaceful reunification, whereby Chinese cities, in this case Xiamen City and Fuzhou City, they're forced upon two Taiwanese islands, the Matsu and the Kinmen Islands. The core strategy is to slowly incorporate Taiwan by establishing a provisional provincial government of Taiwan as a province of Fujian, and it's composed of Taiwanese pro-communist people. And while in that process, Beijing would establish a liaison office in Taiwan. And all of this is being done without considering what the people of Taiwan wants. Specifically, the forcing part is to take the outer islands belonging to Taiwan first, and that plan has now come into concrete action. What's happening now is the CCP established so-called fusion development zones between a Chinese city and one of the islands of Taiwan, and there are two sets. Now, in a new set of recommendations, 21 plus items, other than military, there's all these recommendations for so-called cooperation in all sorts of areas, like education, economic development, social system, transportation, and so much more. And Beijing's state planner has already said that it's ready to build a high-speed railway from Taiwan to China as its latest proposal for the so-called cross-strait integrated development. Right? So Taiwanese people get access to the Chinese market, ease of transportation, access to the wide range of benefits that the mainland has to offer. Other areas you have energy, infrastructure, economic development, they all look great on paper. But actually that plan is quite evil. Kinmen, for example, sits very close to mainland China and has about 130,000 people, whereas Matsu Islands only has about 12,000 people. While this population may not seem that high, they are still technically Taiwanese, and so the geopolitical significance is rather big. The CCP, without any authorization of Taiwan's government, its people, straight up set up fusion development zones or twin cities and just because they want to. And Kinmen and Xiamen with Matsu and Fuzhou is basically what they're trying to do, try to break down Taiwan piece by piece. And so we call this the first step to rendering the sovereignty of Taiwan and its territories essentially useless, to set up a justification for a military invasion. And this is likely coming because we see an increasing number of flyovers and Navy vessels present in the areas around Taiwan. In other words, the so-called peaceful reunification is simply step one in a hybrid invasion scenario, which is a plan that's already being set in motion against Taiwan. Mao Zedong famously says that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. And now Wang Huning says political power grows first out of bags with money. So what they're trying to do is try to be the friendly version to Taiwan first, and if that doesn't work, they will attack if deemed necessary. So forcing this economic fusion system binds the livelihood of people in Kinmen and people in Matsu into the hands of the CCP. So those that are living on the islands have no choice. The CCP will eventually do a referendum vote to which that they will try to get Kinmen and Matsu to return to the mainland and be a part of mainland China. And once they set up that system of the so-called fusion development, it also granted easy residence and citizenship entry for the Taiwanese people to go live on the mainland. And then they provided a lot of incentives, like you can buy properties on the mainland or you can invest. So those that are living on Kinmen and Matsu can be viewed as regular Chinese people rather than a distinct Taiwanese identity. And so they're essentially erasing the boundary that's been set up to protect the Taiwanese people, both culturally, politically, and democratically. They're trying to erase that line. At the same time, they're carefully going to pick out people to live on the islands. And that way they can do this, right, again, without any authorization from the Taiwanese government to take over the islands as pro-CCP. Eventually, they're able to absorb the outer islands of Taiwan. So Wang Huning's evil plan exploits the democratic system. And then you have people like Elon Musk, who's worried about his Tesla business in China, of course, after Apple suffered the hammer of communism recently, and he's now speaking out pro-CCP lines against Taiwan. Elon Musk says that he understands China well. He then proceeds to say that Taiwan is, quote, an integral part of China that is arbitrarily not part of China. And then he compares Taiwan to Hawaii, which is simply just untrue. And they're being helpful in spreading the information that this is an information warfare, a propaganda campaign of the CCP. First of all, most people in Hawaii wants to be a part of the US. Most people in Taiwan do not want to be a part of China. According to one poll, most people in Taiwan want to maintain the status quo, with only 1.6% wanting unification with China. Another poll by the Taiwanese Public Opinion Foundation showed that 48.9% of Taiwanese support obtaining formal national independence, while 26.9% support maintaining the status quo. Hawaii was also annexed by the US in 1898. Taiwan, on the other hand, has been in control by the Japanese since 1859, which is much longer than the US has held Hawaii. But then in 1952, it was returned to the Republic of China. Prior to all of that, it was a part of the Qing dynasty, and so it really has nothing to do with the Chinese Communist Party. So this is all a series of information and united front campaign of the CCP, using influencers like Elon Musk to hijack the message and to fool people, and then using their words, which gets translated and then used for other propaganda purposes to influence even more people. Now, before we go on to talk about the actual unification plan, here's my sponsor for today's video. So you guys know that I recommended these derma roller face masks because they've been helpful for my skin. I've been getting less acne and my face feels quite nice. And they're really time efficient because I use it once a week for about 10 minutes. Just gets the job done. Now the derma roller masks are back in stock. So these contain hyaluronic acid, which is great for protecting your skin's natural moisture, and they're quite popular in Europe and China. So if you want to support this channel, considering checking out Blueberry Quality Products shop. Some of our viewers bought a box of masks to support us, but after they started using them, it felt great and started buying more. So it was sold out for a bit, and now it's back in stock. So click the link in the description and you will receive 15% off all the items in the shop. And if you spend $70 or more, you get free shipping in the US. So check them out, link in the description below. Now, what does this unification plan want to achieve? It does three things. First, it gives justification to the CCP for invading Taiwan, as they now have just forcefully taken the outer islands, and if the US or Taiwan tries to challenge it, it gives them legality. Well, despite not having any legality in the first place, but it does give them legality, right? Just like Crimea. They also went through a referendum vote to split from Ukraine. So the CCP will build up justifications for keeping the islands. So it's hard for countries around the world, especially the US, to get involved in these type of processes simply because they don't have that much legal ground to do so, even though this is all a violation of sovereignty. And a potential referendum really basically just means an election, right? That's what they're saying. This is your democracy. You have to respect the voting of the people, right? But we all know that that's the type of conditions that's created by the CCP to be favorable for leaving. Now, the second is that they're trying to create the ground for a long-term cognitive change within the population of the islands of Taiwan. So divide and conquer, pretending like they're creating this so-called one nationality, that there's no difference between the mainlanders and the Taiwanese people, that there's no difference between how they live. What they're actually doing is setting out a trap, right? That's based on absorbing Kinmen and Matsu. And when people realize that they've been absorbed, it's already too late. So the people on those islands, of course, they can now go to school in China. They will receive brainwashing, propaganda exposure, and have their ideological and cognitive perceptions changed. And this will systematically erase their view of China as negative and turn it into a positive one. And so those Taiwanese people will now feel the same as that of mainland Chinese, and they've successfully conquered it. While this whole process is a soft approach first, the follow-up punishment will be actually worse. For example, if someday they realize that, oh, the mainlanders are actually trying to take us away, well, one of the potential case would be that, say, the Chinese allow them to have electricity or gas or water that runs from the mainland to the islands. What happens if those people then try to resist or attempt to voice their opposition or criticisms? Well, now they can punish them by cutting off their power, gas, and water. And the third point is the CCP testing the water to see if this peaceful unification even has a place. If they get rejected from the Kinmen and the Matsu people, then there's no reason for them to continue for the main island. But if the Matsu and the Kinmen Islands successfully be absorbed by the CCP, then they can apply that same method to the mainland Taiwan and see if that works out as well. If it doesn't, then they will resort to the invasion by force. Now the question is, why would Wang Huning want to formulate this type of new idea? Does it mean that the CCP has caved in on invasion by force, or are they choosing to push that further back? I don't think so. I think the answer is still no. Xi Jinping is very much prepared to invade Taiwan, but this is a first step in their hybrid approach. That's why I call it a one country, one system to begin with, which is contrary to the Hong Kong's one country, two systems. Right off the bat, you have the idea that they know the old stuff's not going to work. People have saw through the entire processes, so the approach has changed. And the timeline of the invasion is also interesting. I believe that the next year's January presidential election in Taiwan will help Xi Jinping decide and measure up who they will be up against. The likely invasion must be carried out before the end of Xi Jinping's third term, which is before or during 2027. And that leaves for about 4 years to give the softer approach a working timeline. Age is a big factor in this, right? Xi Jinping, he can't leave the Taiwan question for the next guy. By 2027, Xi will be 74 to 75 years old, and he's not going to wait to reach Biden's age, right? 80 years old before he's going to launch an invasion. He needs to be cognitively aware of commanding the war. Although China has never stopped the propaganda war against Taiwan, it has also learned the lesson that raw propaganda has backfired before. So now Wang Huning is adopting this new strategy to be more benign, to be more flexible, and to win people over. And using a combination of the economic incentives, salami slicing, and exploiting loopholes, Wang Huning is banking on the Taiwanese government not forcing its own citizens to stay away. The Taiwanese have opposed this idea of the so-called twin economic development, but if the Taiwanese government cannot stop its citizens from engaging with China, it actually is a really bad thing. Right? This whole idea gives the CCP jurisdictions over the islands without them really doing much. Right? Think about this. If the Taiwanese government tried to stop the people there, then the CCP is just going to brand the Taiwanese as one of separatism. Right? They're saying that, oh, look at them. They're now going to paint the narrative that the Taiwanese people are the ones, or the Taiwanese government is the bad guy for trying to stop the so-called peace interaction between the mainland and Taiwan. And now they say that, well, basically we have to invade Taiwan to free the people, like what they're doing with Putin in Crimea in the eastern Donbass region, right? They're saying that we have to free these people that are being forced to comply with the Taiwanese government, that the Taiwanese government's not legit, that we have to really rescue these people. So we have to really get more people to be aware of what's going on here, right? The international community needs to know that the CCP's plan is to do a hybrid invasion. Now, I also want to talk a bit about Xi's plan for invasion and why that is going to happen. Some people may think that because of China's economy right now that they're not going to invade, or that the economy is so bad that how can you really fund a war? Well, if Mao in the 1950s with no money, internationally isolated, and people starving still fought the Korean War against the United States and didn't lose that hard, well then there must be a reason why Xi today, with relatively better conditions than before, must fight the war in Taiwan. In fact, I think Xi Jinping talks a lot about the Korean War. He's Mao's successor in ideology. Just look at China today, right? They're already on this backward trajectory towards the Mao era. Think to yourself, if you are Xi Jinping and you're given the choice to take Taiwan, but face the consequence of international isolation, to have your country's economy go back to that of the 1950s, you have starvation, you have isolation, you have technology going backwards, would you take it? I think the answer for Xi would be yes, because for him, that's the big achievement as a CCP leader. So the extreme thinking of Xi today, most people would think that, rationally speaking, that the war will be fought with money. But look at Putin. He's still going with the war in Ukraine, and he's begging for ammunition from North Korea. His whole country is being sanctioned, yet he's still at war against Ukraine. They don't really care about the lives of the people, so it actually makes sense that the invasion is more likely when the economic conditions worsen. But it doesn't mean that suddenly the time to invade is being pushed up. It just simply means that he's more willing. So how do we combat this whole hybrid invasion? Well, I think the first step is information warfare. We have to expose the plan like we're already doing here. But the next step is we have to be on a good path to reduce Xi Jinping's ability to successfully invade. Right? We may not be able to stop his invasion, but we can try to stop the invasion from being successful. So that is taking, strategic partnerships in the region. You have the United States with allies, right? Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, Vietnam, India. And so the goal here is to punish China for doing what they're potentially going to do. And while we have to focus so much on the military, we also have to focus on how the United States should actually get the softer strategy exposed, which I think needs a lot more help, because that requires a lot of education for the Chinese politics. And so what we have to do in the end is launch a counter-hybrid defense, and that's going to matter a lot. All right, that's it today for the episode, or part 2 of the Taiwan invasion plan in this new Xi Jinping era. This time we discussed the hybrid invasion plan. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, this is China Insider. I'm David Zhang.